Gather the Spirit, harvest the poor. Our separate fires will kindle one flame. Witness the mystery of this hour. Our dark appear all the same. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Gather the spirit of heart and mind. Seeds for the sowing are laid in store, nurtured in love and conscience refined. Let chorus of spirit united once more. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength. Gather to celebrate once again. Gather the Spirit, growing in all, drawn by the moon and fed by the sun. Winter to spring and summer to fall, the chorus of life resounding as one. Gather in peace, gather in thanks, gather in sympathy now and then. Gather in hope, compassion and strength. Gather to celebrate once again.
Good morning, and welcome to all of you who are here with us in the moment, and to those of you that will be catching us later on today. My name is Emily Salinas. My pronouns are she, ella. I will be serving as your worship associate, together with John Murphy, pronouns he, him, Nancy Olson, our acting director of faith formation, pronouns she, her, and Gay Perbieri, our music director, whose pronouns are he, him, and the Reverend Phil Lund, by video, pronouns he, him. We are your worship team on the chancel today. Children of all ages are welcome to attend our services, and today there will be faith formation and nursery care for all children. Just a few announcements for today. I did want to let you know, Jim's, you all may have remembered about Jim. I think we have some good news to share, but he did lose his keys. And so if anybody knows about Jim Scrimenti's keys, where they might be, please see one of us. Also, pay attention to your email. You'll receive an invite to update your information on our community online database and our media system realm. So as we begin our time together, we acknowledge the land itself and those who have sustained it through the generations. We are upon the unceded land of the Lenape, Mi'kmaq, Kaskaskia, Shawnee, and Kickapoo people who were pushed from their land and whose children were stolen. As we strive to be a community of justice, may we continue to find ways to make reparations. One final announcement you may have seen in the know, but this evening, this is the evening, we will have a recital of our All Souls worship team from 5:30 to 6:30. So please do plan on being here for that musical ministry. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily. Deep breath. We're so glad you were able to make it here today, either online or here through the weather. Come whoever you are. Come with your hurts, your imperfections, your places that feel raw and exposed. Come whoever you are. Come with your strengths that the world shudders to hold. Come with your wild imaginings of a better world. Come with your hopes that it seems no one wants to hear. Wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, we will make a place for you. We will build a home together. Ours is no caravan of despair. We walk together. Come, yet again come. Come, let us worship together. This ritual of lighting our chalice reminds us to continually renew our promise to live into our covenant, to put love into action, and to live out this community of love and justice that we aim to be. Please rise in body or spirit as we share the words of our covenant that are printed in your order of service. We will be saying them in both English and Spanish, with the Spanish first. And if you're with us online, please let us know in the chat where you are saying the covenant from. Amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia, y el servicio es su ley. Vivir juntos en la paz, buscar la verdad en el amor, y ayudarnos uno al otro. Este es nuestro pacto. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. This is our covenant. You may be seated. And we have a reading this morning, a message of hope by the Reverend Dr. Bill Sinkford. The final message we would pass on is a message of hope. There's a reason that people of color have become Unitarian Universalists from the very beginnings of this faith and still today. There is a fundamental hope in our values and our aspirations that speak to persons across the boundaries of race and culture, across language, across economic circumstance, and even ability. It is the empowerment of the Unitarian legacy and the love of our Universalist promise that draws people to us and that keeps them here. It is the culture, that wider culture, and not our theology, that has been our biggest obstacle. And because that is true, our final message is a message of hope, because we can change our culture, and if we have the will to do that. Thank you, Bill. All right, our children are now welcome to leave for classes because we have cut this hymn, and we're going to move on to the joys and sorrows.
Thank you, Nancy. So if you would please join me in a few moments just to acknowledge what is currently bringing joy or sorrow to our community. So one joy, and it's a great joy, that we learned that Jim Scrimenti, if you were here last Sunday, you remember that he slipped and fell on an ice patch on Channing Road. He was examined at the hospital and released. And he had no life-threatening injuries, but he still has some numbness in his fingers and toes. So we'll wish him well as he continues to recover. In our wider circle of concern, we are mindful of those in our midst who are experiencing broken spirits or heartache or difficulty in their lives. Let us hold that which may be a joy or sorrow in your heart as we enter into a moment of silence and contemplation. Will you join me? Thank you, All Souls members, for your love and concern for one another. May all hearts be granted healing and restoration today and always. I would ask you to rise, or in body or in spirit, as we sing hymn 123, Spirit of Life, first in Spanish and then in English, if you would, please.
Fuente de amor, ven hacia mí, y al corazón cántale tu compasión. Sobre volar, sube mi amor, hasta moldear la justicia de la vida.
May be seated. So, when we meet someone new, we often try to make a good impression by sharing the best of ourselves. Same holds true when we first share with someone the story of our faith. However, we need to move beyond the good parts version of Unitarian Universalism if we're going to build a beloved community. Today, we welcome by video the Reverend Phil Lund, UUA consultant for Congregational Life Staff for the Mid-America region of UUA for this service. His reflection is entitled Unitarian Universalism, the Good Parts Version. Please enjoy Phil with me. Yeah.
The goal is to broaden our perspectives and give us the opportunity to explore topics we might otherwise miss. Often we'll follow the suggestions of our larger association and cover something like the UUA's Common Read. For this specific series of generative conversations, we were looking at the 2019-20 Common Read, An Indigenous People's History of the United States by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. For this conversation, we were covering Chapter 4, Bloody Footprints. As the title suggests, it's a pretty brutal chapter, chronicling the various atrocities committed by the earliest European settlers of North America. One passage in particular caught my attention. It was about a pre-dawn attack on Mystic Fort in the Connecticut colony that left over 500 members of the Pequot tribe dead. Here's a description from the young reader's version of An Indigenous People's History of what took place on May 26, 1637. Pequots were living in two forts. In one fort were mainly Pequot men. In the other were primarily women, children, and elders. Mercenary Captain John Mason targeted the latter. Slaughter ensued. After killing most of the Pequot defenders, the soldiers set fire to the structures and burned the remaining people alive. This event is known as the Mystic Massacre, and although I've never heard of it by that name, I had the feeling I'd read about it before. The story was similar to something I had run across while exploring my genealogy, something I've been really getting into for a few years. I immediately logged on to my Ancestry.com account and began searching for relatives that lived in the Connecticut colony around that time. In a source called The Genealogy of the Thrall Family to the year 1862, I found this passage about my 9th great-grandfather, William Thrall, who was born in England in 1605 and died on August 3rd, 1679, in Windsor, Connecticut. Windsor was required to furnish 30 men for the offensive war against the Pequods, the names of only 15 of whom can now be found. William Thrall, our ancestor, was one of the 15. The battle was fought on the 26th of May, 1637. The danger was imminent, and so complete the victory that caused universal rejoicing throughout New England, and a grant of land was given to each soldier and officer. And to this day, the memory of an ancestor who was in the Pequod fight is an honorable heirloom for every Connecticut family. Whew, I was stunned. My ancestor was one of 30 men who committed an act that is now considered by many scholars to be genocide. In addition, he was rewarded with 50 acres of land in Windsor. Not only that, but the practices used by the colonists during the Pequod War became the blueprint for the treatment of native peoples throughout North America. Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz writes that this way of war, forged in the first century of colonization, destroying indigenous villages and fields, killing civilians, ranging and scalp hunting, became the basis for the wars against the indigenous across the continent into the late 19th century. Far from being an honorable heirloom, this chapter of my family's history is a blood-stained relic, a blow to the good parts version of an unexamined belief of mine, that my ancestors were numbered amongst those we once lauded in the hymn, "Bring, O Past Your Honor," pioneers undaunted who, full of frontier courage, made their way across this land. And yet there are other parts of my ancestry that could be considered honorable heirlooms. For example, I recently discovered that I am related to one Gerhard Hendricks, who 50 years after the Mystic Massacre signed the very first protest against slavery on this continent. Here's what I found out about the Germantown protest. The 1688 Germantown Quaker petition against slavery was the first protest against African American slavery made by a religious body in the English colonies. It was drafted by 4 Quakers, including Gerhard Hendricks, living in Germantown, Pennsylvania, on behalf of the Germantown meeting of the Religious Society of Friends to raise the issue of slavery with the Quaker meeting which they attended. The men gathered and wrote a petition based upon the Bible's golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, urging the meeting to abolish slavery. It argues that every human, regardless of belief, color, or ethnicity, has rights that should not be violated. This petition was the first American document of its kind that made a plea for equal human rights for everyone. So among the many thousands of ancestors of mine alive in the 16th century, I can find those whose actions are commendable as well as those whose actions are contemptible. Just as joy and woe are woven fine, so are honor and disgrace. Recently, I was reminded of just how important it is to acknowledge this certainty in our lives. I was in Milwaukee for the Liberal Religious Educators Association Fall Conference. At that time, as part of our time there, we visited the American Black Holocaust Museum, an enlightening experience for me for many reasons. One of the things I appreciated about the museum was that they called their docents, their guides, griots, a word for West African oral historians and storytellers. After our visit, Reggie Jackson, the head griot at the museum, spoke to us at the conference, and here's what I learned from him. Griots tell stories in a variety of ways about a variety of topics. Some of those topics are very happy stories to tell. These are the stories of the triumphs of our people. But we are also required to be honest by also telling some of those ugly, those disappointing stories of the tragedies that they've suffered as well. It's always important to understand that the stories of the triumphs and the stories of the tragedies combined together give you a deeper understanding of the legacy of the people. Triumphs and tragedies together give us a deeper understanding of our legacy. These words touched me as being profoundly true. I've seen it in my own life, in the lives of my ancestors, and yes, in the history of this faith tradition. So, here are just a few examples that go beyond the good parts version of Unitarian Universalism. You might think that both Unitarianism and Universalism, two of the more progressive faith traditions in the United States, would have been unequivocally against slavery. But as Faith Like a River, a program on Unitarian Universalist history for adults, tells us, the debate about slavery in the United States proved contentious both within Unitarianism and Universalism. By the end of the 1840s, the positions either promoting or discouraging anti-slavery action were well framed. Although most were opposed to slavery itself, not all Unitarians or Universalists supported the abolitionist position. Some preferred a more gradual approach to abolition, one that would assure financial compensation for those who had invested in the purchase of slaves and avoid major economic and social disorder. Many involved in churches and other traditional institutions believed continued prosperity and stability relied on social order, and the tactics of many abolitionists were simply too radical and disruptive. Many Unitarians and Universalists, reluctant to condemn all slaveholders as sinners, acknowledged mitigating circumstances, such as treating slaves in a manner co-religionists would deem kind. In hindsight, this failure to support abolition by large numbers of Unitarians and Universalists could be seen as a disgrace, a tragedy. But it is part of our heritage, as surely as the honor and triumphs of people like Theodore Parker, a Unitarian minister who was part of the Boston Vigilance Committee, an abolitionist organization formed to protect escaped slaves from being kidnapped and returned to slavery in the South. The story goes that Parker wrote sermons with a pistol on his desk to protect runaway slaves. While our tradition's history regarding slavery in this country has been known for some time, there's another chapter in Unitarian Universalism that has been uncovered or recovered only in the last few decades. The stories of Unitarians benefiting from the federal government's Indian boarding school policy in the late 19th century. Reverend Karen G. Johnston writes in a sermon entitled Holding History, Honoring Indigenous Communities, "Perhaps you are like me, somewhere between surprised and shocked to hear that Unitarians had their own Indian residential schools. It is not something I learned about as a layperson or in seminary. However, it has been duly and proudly recorded in contemporary materials that Unitarians were involved in the establishment and management of a number of such schools in the 19th century." And she goes on to quote Reverend Dana Stiver. "Early Unitarian writings indicate that many Unitarians propagated or at least remained complicit in the popular idea that westward expansion of the American frontier marked an advance of civilization over the savagery of native peoples. Indeed, Unitarian minister Henry F. Bond, who ran the Montana Industrial School for Indians with his wife, is recorded as saying this about the Crow students there. They are all bright, promising boys. How such good-appearing fellows come of an ignorant, lazy, squalid, orphaned race is a constant surprise to us. I shall dread the time, if it comes, when they slip back into their old abodes and possibly leave." Bond's words are a continuation of the colonial narratives that fueled atrocities like the Mystic Massacre, ugly stereotypes that encourage the views of natives as untrustworthy, bloodthirsty savages who needed to be reformed through conversion to Christianity. Yet another tragedy from our past, and while it may not qualify as a triumph, the UUA's solidarity in the middle of the last decade with the water protectors at Standing Rock in North Dakota demonstrated a marked transformation in how white Unitarian Universalists interact with indigenous peoples. My final example is more recent. It involves not one, not two, but 3 General Assemblies, the annual gathering of Unitarian Universalists from around the country. And much of this history that I'm about to share comes from the UUA's Common Read for 2022-23, Mistakes and Miracles, Congregations on the Road to Multiculturalism by Nancy Palmer Jones and Karen Lynn. We pick up the story in 1969, where a third of the attendees at General Assembly are people of color. For those of us who've attended GAs in the last decade or so will attest, the vast majority of attendees are likely to be white, way more than 2/3. What was going on in the late 60s that brought so many people of color to this annual gathering of UUs? My understanding is that the involvement of white UUs in the civil rights movement had caught the attention of people of color and brought them to our association. And the UUA had responded by earmarking $1 million of its budget to the Black Affairs Council, or BAC. Money to be distributed in annual installments over 4 years. But in 1969, the delegates at GA voted to also distribute some of the money to another group, Black and White Action, BAWA, an integrated organization. This was seen as a betrayal by the Black Affairs Council, resulting in a walkout by hundreds of black delegates, other people of color, and white allies. Many of those who walked out never returned. And the UUA has never again had a General Assembly where 1/3 of the attendees were people of color. Nearly 30 years later, the delegates at the 1997 General Assembly passed a resolution called Towards an Anti-Racist Unitarian Universalist Association, which, among other things, lifted up the faith's successes and failures in the struggle for racial justice. Ultimately, the resolution asserted that to be true to the call of Unitarian Universalism, we Unitarian Universalists must dismantle systems of hatred, discrimination, and supremacy rather than perpetuate them. This resolution put the work of becoming an anti-racist, anti-oppression, multicultural institution at the center of the UUA. And these words from the association's Leadership Council during Reverend Bill Sinkford's presidency get to the heart of that work. With humility and courage born of our history, we are called as Unitarian Universalists to build the beloved community where all souls are welcome as blessings and the human family lives whole and reconciled. 20 years later, the Unitarian Universalist Association was still trying to live into this vision of the beloved community. A series of events in the spring of 2017 revealed that the association's dream of becoming an anti-racist, anti-oppression, multicultural institution was still, for many people of color, just that, a dream. A flawed hiring process in the Congregational Life staff group, my staff group, revealed that the inner workings of the association still, to a great degree, favored white candidates for leadership positions. UUA President Peter Morales, along with 2 white male leaders, resigned their positions, and the UUA board appointed 3 black leaders to serve as co-presidents until June of that year, when a new UUA president would be elected at General Assembly. The 3 interim co-presidents, Reverend Sophia Bentoncourt, Reverend Bill Sinkford, and Dr. Leon Spencer, shared their final report about the fallout of the hiring incident to the 2017 General Assembly. At the end, Reverend Bill Sinkford closed with these words: "The final message we would pass on is a message of hope. There is reason that people of color have become Unitarian Universalists. From the very beginnings of this faith and still today, there's a fundamental hope in our values and our aspirations that speaks to persons across the boundaries of race and culture and language and economic circumstance and ability. It is the empowerment of our Unitarian legacy and the love of our Universalist promise that draw people to us and keep us here. It is our culture and not our theology that has been our biggest obstacle. And because that is true, our final message is a message of hope. We can change our culture if we have the will to do it." We are currently living out this chapter of our faith's history, and it remains to be seen whether we have the will to do it or not, whether the outcome will be a tragedy or a triumph. Nancy Palmer Jones and Karen Lynn offered this perspective on what it will take to create the beloved community we Unitarian Universalists aspire to. They write that all humans have this streaky nature, a mix of beauty and brokenness, that if taken into the Unitarian Universalist souls as core beliefs, this idea that all of us humans are embodiments of beauty and brokenness would indeed compel our Unitarian Universalist communities toward racial inclusion. Honor and disgrace, triumph and tragedy, beauty and brokenness, all parts of our past, our present, and our future. The good parts version of Unitarian Universalism tells only half the story. Let us never be afraid to tell our whole story, for that will be the story of the beloved community where all souls are welcomed as blessings and the human family lives whole and reconciled.
Hello. Here we go. I'm just taking opportunity of this moment that we just watched Liz playing. I have had very good feedbacks about our music here in the church, and that makes me really, really happy. If you want to support the music ministry, besides come work with us, you can also come to the recital today. We will have the choir singing beautiful music from traditional composers, but also more contemporary composers. And we will also have piano solo, right, Liz? I will also play something, and we will have voice solo also with Jane Alexander and Charlie. So it's gonna be amazing. So, oh yes, the time. Thank you. It's gonna be at 5:30 p.m. until 6:30 p.m. Okay, and don't worry, we will have a 5 minutes break in the middle.
So, first of all, thank you for being here and helping warm up some of the pews by sitting on it. I think the temperature's gone up a little bit, and it should be more comfortable this evening. We can keep our fingers crossed. As I understand it, the boiler people are on their way, are here, and so we're on the way to warmth. These closing words are entitled Prayer, and they are by the Reverend Bill Sinkford, who was mentioned in the video. Bill Sinkford is a past president of UUA, and actually those of you who were here for Reverend Anastasia's ordination remember Reverend Bill Sinkford. And his wife actually was and maybe still is a member of this church. So, you know, maybe we'll have him here one of these days. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Anyway, these closing words by Bill Sinkford. Spirit of life and love, great mystery at the heart of things, dear God, these days when our confidence in easy progress has been shaken, when our vision of the beloved community seems clouded in an uncertain future, be with us and help us be with one another. Let us be clear in our commitment to welcome the human spirit in each of us as all that we are. Spirit of life, move in our hearts and help our lives take the shape of justice. Move in our hands so that our actions point us toward the beloved community. Move within us and amongst us. Let our voices sing your song as we witness with our lives that the power of love is stronger than the love of power. Let our voices sing your song as we answer the call of love. So may it be, and amen.